Dave Domina with us here on Drive Time Lincoln this afternoon. He's part of a lawsuit. He's the lawyer on behalf of landowners that are suing the state of Nebraska over pipeline regulation laws that were passed in the Nebraska legislature this past session. So, Dave, before what was passed in the special session of 2011 was because we kept hearing that the need for the special session was that Nebraska didn't have any laws to govern oil pipelines. So was there something in place before last special session, say 2010 or 2009, that this falls under?
No. Nebraska had nothing before the 2011 special session. Out of the special session came a bill passed, as I recall, unanimously, following the work of Speaker Flood, to empower the Public Service Commission to take action. That statute was not criticized by landowners. The 2012 legislature passed LB 1161, which was amended after committee hearings within a few hours of the final vote, with an amendment that was essentially never heard in committee. And that new statute passed in 2012 on the 57th day, I think, of a 60-day session, is the one that is challenged here.
So I guess the question that I'm coming up with is, when we look at the constitutionality, because there wasn't anything in the Constitution that says the PSC has to be the one governing, can the legislature then, regardless of the process, the process may be another question, but is the legislature, is it not within their authority to change that, even though it wasn't in the Nebraska Constitution?
No, the Constitution said before 2011 that the Public Service Commission is responsible for the regulation of common carriers.
Okay.
Pipelines are common carriers. The Public Service Commission had never regulated crude oil pipelines, and the legislature had never acted on crude oil pipelines. The legislature has some authority to address that subject. It did that in 2011. What it does not have the authority to do, we think, is to empower the governor to do what the Constitution says the Public Service Commission must do, which is to regulate common carriers.
Attorney Dave Domina with us here on Drive Time Lincoln this afternoon. A lawsuit has been filed here in Nebraska challenging a Nebraska law. It's against the state of Nebraska, but challenging a law that was passed in the unicameral this past session just a couple months ago. Dave, we talked about the process briefly, how it was, in your eyes, or maybe the eyes of your clients, seemed like it was last minute without public input, but it was within the legislative rules. Does that mean legislative rules for Nebraska violate our own Constitution?
No, it doesn't mean that the legislature's rules violate the Constitution. It's the legislature's product that has to be measured against constitutional standards. It might suggest that that legislative rule that allows this kind of thing to happen is less desirable than a different rule might be, but it isn't the rule that we challenge.
Okay, so that's not part of the lawsuit. That may just be part of the talking points. Could that come up when this gets to a courtroom?
No, I don't think so. I think it's interesting background that a judge might be interested in knowing. The court might be interested in looking at, what happened in the legislative history of this law. What really happened here? And it may be fairly easy to identify the haste makes waste mistake that we think occurred, but the issue will be, is the end product, the actual bill itself, unconstitutional?
And Dave, another part of what we heard today during a conference call just a couple hours ago was about judicial review. Explain that part of the challenge, that you feel that there wasn't judicial review in the bill.
I will. Of course, like all of the states and the federal government, Nebraska's government is broken into constitutional departments. And people easily recognize the executive, legislative, and judicial departments. It so happens we also have a Board of Regents and a Public Service Commission, which are constitutional organs of our government. But this bill does not provide for judicial review. And the courts are pretty jealous of their authority to be the ultimate decider of whether a governor, a legislature, a public service commission has complied with or failed to comply with constitutional mandates or the rules governing the conduct of an official or an organization of government. Since this statute doesn't provide for judicial review, we think it is flawed by that constitutional deficit as well.
This may be a layman's question, but isn't judicial review the process we're going through right now with a challenge before a court?
Well, what we're doing right now is reviewing the validity of the statute, so we're reviewing the legislature. The bill fails to provide for judicial review of the governor when he acts on a pipeline decision. The question, Governor, did you obey the rules you were required to follow, is not posed for the courts by this statute because there is no procedure for how a case can get to court to challenge what decision the governor would make.
I see. Because I was just confused about the judicial aspect of this. You're saying in the lawsuit that there is no structure to challenge a decision the governor would make.
That's right.
I see.
The bill should have said that the decision is subject to review under the Administrative Procedures Act, for example, or something like that, and it does not contain such a provision.
Dave, appreciate
Again, in all likelihood, haste makes waste.
Dave, appreciate the time. We'll continue to follow this as well. Thanks for joining us this afternoon on Drive Time Lincoln.
You're welcome.
Dave Domina, the attorney for the three landowners suing the state of Nebraska, live with us here on DTL. This is just the next chapter of the Keystone XL pipeline debate here in the Cornhusker State. That was live on the Liberty First Credit Union hotline, and it's 4:55 on KLIN, 1400 AM, 94.5 FM.